Okay, the sound seems to be working. This week we are talking about light in extension. Ritual versus meditation. A lot of people who contact me mention that, oh yes, I meditate every day, and meditation is very important for spiritual practice. And yet the Kabbalah magic curriculum doesn't seem to require much meditation. There are some things in it that are called meditations, but they're more like visualization exercises. So what I'd like to talk about today is that the path of magic is more of a tantric path. And what I mean by that is you sort of have these purified ideas about what a spiritual practice should be. And I think these purified ideas are highly influenced by iconoclasm and maybe even by iconoclasm, let's say, and maybe also by Protestant beliefs, where images are idolatrous, and any rituals or trappings of ritual or instruments such as cups and wands and things like that, these are all magic and they are evil, and therefore you should really just sit down and meditate and get rid of all that stuff, because somehow using all this equipment is akin to doing magic, and magic has a bad reputation in many cultures. Okay, well, and then along comes Tantra and says, oh, no. If you know how to do the magical techniques, the rituals, and using the wands and the cups and the swords and the daggers and things like that, if you know how to use this equipment and you know how to do ritual gestures and chanting words of power, these techniques are stronger, better than just sitting there meditating. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the principle behind that. All right, I'm not saying one of these is better than the other. I'm basically just saying that the principles of magic have been denigrated way too long, and I would suggest that they are much more powerful. And if you have like a general just meditation practice that's like Zen or something like that, it might be worth it to incorporate some more magical techniques into that practice. What I've noticed is that some Zen masters' techniques eventually do take on a few interesting little imagination tricks and visualizations to help the students out, because once again, the tantric techniques or the imagination techniques tend to be more powerful than just sitting there waiting for enlightenment to come to you. The way to talk about this is to talk about the Golden Dawn's concept of light in extension. Light coming forth from the divine into this world. That's kind of what that means. And I saw this really cool term used by Israel Regardie in the introduction to the Golden Dawn book. He said that the student of magic can learn how to experience the acosmic essence. And so acosmic simply means not of this world or not of this cosmos. And so the idea is that transcending this cosmos or this physical universe is another realm, and then you can experience sort of whatever's in that realm sort of gushing forth, and you can kind of feel your connection to it. And this is the concept of light in extension. The acosmic essence. Really cool term. So how does one do that? Well, in Golden Dawn magic, most of the techniques of Golden Dawn magic are revealed in the neophyte grade, in the neophyte initiation ritual. Yeah, they're all sort of more or less hidden in there. And when one studies the ritual and maybe goes through it literally, these magical formulas are imprinted on your psyche, and they eventually awaken over time. And you can start to do them, or you can develop your own formulas based on them. So we will talk about some of these magic formulas, mainly the formula of light and extension. And there's a portion during the neophyte ritual where the adepts say, "Kabs, pect, conks, pax, light in extension." And there's some dramatic knocking noises going on while they do that. And you'll notice that these 3 incantations are 3-word phrases. And the number 3 is very important to spirit, as we've talked about in previous videos. And we're going to talk about that a little bit here. And the main importance of the neophyte ritual, the 0 equals 0 initiation, is this concept of light in extension. Light in extension is something that the adept experiences on a regular basis. Okay? And in the neophyte initiation ritual, if you have adepts who are worth their salt, they can have you experiencing that light in extension during the ritual itself. The Kabs Pect is supposedly ancient Egyptian. I'm not sure how the scholars, the Golden Dawn people, derived these things. Conks Pax is supposedly Greek, though I don't think it is. They say it's Greek, so I'm not sure where they're getting it. Apparently it was something spoken during the Eleusinian Mysteries. So, interesting. The effect of these mysterious words during ritual is quite dramatic. Now, the principle of experiencing light in extension, okay, or the experience of becoming enlightened through magical ritual, same thing, really, is based on the most fundamental principle of magic, and that is the aspects call forth the essence. Okay, it's not really so difficult a concept. I've talked about it in a previous video. It's kind of like what an artist does when he wants to conjure up a theme or get you to feel a certain theme. He will incorporate it into the stage and into the behaviors of the actors and into the special effects, all kinds of manifestations of that theme. And if these manifestations of that theme, these aspects of it, that is, if they're presented in the right way, in a sort of ritualistic, magical way, the audience then experiences the essence of that theme. Okay, and of course we know this to be true. We see it happen in movies all the time, really good movies, that is. All right, so in the neophyte ritual, in the 0 equals 0 ritual, there are various god forms, and these god forms mainly exist at certain stations within the neophyte temple. Okay, some of these god forms are stationary; they do not move, and some of them do move, and they pretty much the temple officers, the magicians who are performing the ceremony, adopt these god forms, and then the god form moves around with that person on the floor of the ritual space. And we're not going to go into all those various god forms. They are Egyptian god forms in the 0 equals 0 ritual of the Golden Dawn. The 0 equals 0 ritual is the neophyte initiation ritual, in case that's not clear. They're both the same thing. And arguably the most powerful or the most prominent god form in that temple space is the god form of Osiris, who sits on the throne of the East. So he's pretty much sitting along that eastern wall, in the center of the eastern wall. And he represents the rising of the sun, or the spirit, of light dawning in the morning, sort of thing, right? Osiris in this form is what we call his passive form. This is him mummified. So you can see his feet are basically bound together. He's a mummy. And so after he dies, he disappears into the underworld and he rules over the land of the dead. And as such, he can be seen both in the east and the west, because where do you go when you die? You go west, right? So you sink down, you go down with the setting sun, and you go down into the land of the dead, which is under the earth. And then in the east, where the sun rises, that's where the soul is born, and the soul comes back into this world from the east. And in the neophyte ritual, the god form of Osiris is in the east. He does not move from that position, even though the Hierophant, which is an actual person who adopts that officer's rank in the performance of the ritual, does move occasionally from the throne to do something on the temple floor. When the Hierophant gets up from the throne that's in the east, he leaves the Osiris form there, and he adopts another god form, which is the active form of Osiris, Auroris, something like this, anyway. And Auroris is basically a form of Horus, which is the son of Osiris, very interestingly, okay? But Auroris is referred to as Horus the Elder. And that means this is Horus when he has already proved himself capable of ruling Egypt. He's already defeated Set, and he has now become an embodiment of his father, Osiris. So the interesting thing is, when the Hierophant gets up from the throne, he takes on this form, because this form is the offspring of Osiris, because Horus is his son, Isis is his mother, and therefore Auroris, or this god form of Horus, is a personification of the principle of light in extension. Light extending forth from the east and coming into the action of the temple floor, the temple of neophytes, and doing something there, doing something very important, initiating the new neophyte into the outer order of the Golden Dawn, in this case, along with the other officers who adopt other forms. Okay, and when the Hierophant sits back down in the east, then he's back in the passive form of Osiris, this one here, back in that mummy form. The Hierophant is now dead again. But of course, he's not really dead. He is alive forevermore. And he holds the keys of hell and of death, etc., right? This is the goal of the initiate in the Golden Dawn, ultimately, is to achieve this sort of power of Osiris, so that even when you're dead, you're not dead. Okay, and that's sort of what it means in the East to become free from the wheel of birth and death. You continue existing no matter what. Even after your body dies, you keep going, and you can come forth in new incarnations, sort of like as a bodhisattva or something like that. Interesting idea. All right, so a repeated theme in light and extension is the numbers 3 and the number 4. Okay, it's like if you want to figure out for yourself, how can I experience light and extension? Well, the keys to this are all over in the Golden Dawn system. It's important to master them and then experience them in your daily ritual practice. Okay, and it can take a number of years before they click. Okay, and of course, going through a neophyte ceremony and various other initiation ceremonies can be a big help. Also, studying the neophyte ceremony can be a big help. And you'll notice that when it comes to light and extension, I Isis, Apophis, and Osiris are really important. Okay. Now Osiris is a dying and living god. He's dead and alive at the same time. Okay. So, and he was betrayed by Set and killed, and his body was cut into pieces, and he was reassembled. And Isis used magic to conceive from his dead body. Necromancy, necrophilia. Well, anyway, she was able to draw forth his essence from the underworld, and so basically give birth to Horus, his rightful heir. Okay, this is really more a mystical reference, so that it's really a reference to the adept who is able to die and then, of course, be reborn in new forms. Okay, this is something that happens while people are alive. Okay, they experience an ego death and then they come forth as a new persona. And this is something that the adept can do consciously, and it's not that really that hard to figure out, because there are many musical artists who do it or attempt to do it. They basically do away with one persona and then kind of disappear for a while, and then they come back with a totally new look and a totally new theme, and they explore that for quite a while, and then they sort of go through a death process again, and then they come up in a new incarnation again. So, Madonna's a good example that Madonna did that in her career. She came back several times as different personas. And the numbers 3 and the number 4 are important in the magical formulas. Okay, and of course, since Osiris is a dying and resurrecting god, he is very much like Jesus of Nazareth. Okay, and I think many Christians would agree that the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross is a formula for light and extension as well. And the Golden Dawn does some really cool stuff with this. INRI, which was, those are the letters that hung over the cross, which stands for Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews in Latin. Many other things have been attributed to that, including the names of the Hebrew names for the 4 elements. Okay, I would be for Yam, N for Naur, R for Ruach, which is air, among other things, breath, and I for Yebeshas, which is earth. And INRI, the number 4 corresponding to the 4 elements, or in this case, because it's the sacrificial INRI, it is the sacrificing of the 4 elements, or the relinquishing of the 4 elements. Okay, so that the elements can be sort of let go, and then the spirit that's behind them can shine forth. And so you have the numbers 3 and the number 4. So the number 4 tends to be what you can see, and the number 3 represents what's invisible behind it. And this is really more of a numerology thing, where the essence of numerology is that the odd numbers represent the betwixt and the between of the invisible energies that emerge into this world in the form of the even numbers. The even numbers are visible, and the odd numbers are, invisible or essential. And an easier way to look at this is you look at the 2 temples of King Solomon's temple, the 2 pillars of King Solomon's temple, or the 2 pillars in the Golden Dawn Neophyte ceremony. One of them is black, one pillar is black, and one of them is white. And these represent the extremes of manifestation, or the endpoints of vibration. Okay, and whatever's in between is really the essence that's emerging within that field that's visible. The only thing you can see are the 2 pillars, and the essence of them, which is generating them, is invisible. Okay, so in the world of the physical senses, we can only see even numbers, if that makes sense. All right. That's the principle of numerology that's behind all of this stuff. And once again, all this stuff sounds really irrational and silly unless you've been working with these principles for a while and the connections start to form. Okay. All right. See, as many of you know, there's something called the tetragrammaton in Kabbalah. And it's Yud, He, Vav, He. 4 letters. And in this case, you read them from right to left. Okay. That's Yud, He, Vav, He. But here, oh, there's 5 letters. We have Yud, He, Shin, Vav, He. Okay. And then, of course, Yud, He, Vav, He, those Hebrew letters that's the name of God, Jehovah, or Yahovah. And when you add the letter Shin to the middle, it becomes Yeshua or Joshua or Jesus. The interesting thing is that if all you have are the 4 letters, everything is sort of external and visible, okay? And when you operate only in terms of what you see in the external world, the world is really a harsh place, okay? It's just a bunch of physical forces beating up on each other and whirling around pointlessly, okay? Now, this is the world of the Old Testament where everything was really harsh and, dictated by harsh principles. And supposedly in the New Testament, at least for Christians anyway, then the letter Shin comes forth and redeems those 4 elements. And of course, in order to come forth, the God gets incarnate as a son, Jesus. Or same thing that happens in Egypt, right? Osiris incarnates as Horus. My. I guess the Christian pantheon of deities is not so much different from other kinds of spirituality. And so when you want to work with light and extension, one of the chief emblems of light and extension is the wand. It's really quite big, isn't it? This is the Adeptus wand, which I have students make in the Kabbalah Magic Book. The construction of this wand is mostly, if you can see the whole thing, mostly an initiation project. So the building of this wand, hopefully it gives you some ahas about the numbers 3 and the number 4. As you can see, there are 4 elements here, the red, the blue, the yellow, and the green. That's fire, water, air, earth. And in between them, you have the colors of the supernals on the Tree of Life, okay? And that is Kether, Hakma, and Bina. So the white, the gray, and the black, that's the principle of 3 shining through the veil of the 4, which is the even number of the 4 elements, okay? And you can see it goes from extremely bright to dimmer and then to darkness, okay? So that principle of 3 is the principle of light in extension. Even the darkness is a manifestation of the light. And so that ray of light is shooting through this wand, so to speak. It's really only visible through the 4 elements, at least to our physical senses anyway, okay? And you can see it also has the tetragrammaton on it, the Yud, the He, and the Vav, and the He. It has the letter Shin for the pentagrammaton up top. So sort of invisible, but of course not invisible when you look at the top of the wand. And of course on the bottom we have the pentagram. Okay, so it's a very nice initiation tool to make. You can use it too. Yeah, it has, I go through some detail about how to use the wand. But really, once you've done that kind of exercise, every wand becomes that wand for you. So the principles of light and extension really begin to sink in for you. And you can even create your own rituals or your own wands. This is my wand, actually. It's quite ordinary. It's an oaken dowel. I do some fancy stuff to it, like I anoint it with olive oil and stuff like that. But really, I mean, I in many cases, the adept adopts much simpler tools than the initiate might need. The new initiate might need, in order to learn his craft. Okay, because once it's all sunk in, you may or may not keep some of those outward trappings of, like the stuff that you were building when you were learning all this stuff and becoming initiated. All right, there's also the principles of Yin and Yang, which are very important. I did go over them, I think, in the last video. I went over them. And remember that Yang extends forth from Yin. This is a very elementary, basic principle. Okay, Yin is the feminine force, supposedly. Okay, or the force of darkness, and the Yang is the male force, or the force of light. All right. The reason we say that is because Yin is invisible and Yang is visible. Okay. Not so difficult a concept to understand, because when you come out of your mother, you are visible. Here I am. I'm in the world now, right? And then when you die, you go back into the earth, back into the mother, and you disappear. And now you're invisible. In other words, before you were born, you were Osiris in the underworld, that is, the mummified dead god. And after you were born, you are Horus, or Auroras, and you are now come forth. Okay? It's a simple principle. Now, now you might notice that this Yin and Yang principle, Yin isn't really the underworld per se, but she's the background behind Horus. Okay, so when Horus dies, or when this incarnation of Osiris dies, he goes back into his mother, or it's really more like he goes back through his mother into the underworld. Okay, so really behind Yin, there's Tao. There's the concept of Tao. Remember, and we're doing Yin and Yang here, so these are Taoist concepts. And so behind both Yin and Yang are Tao. Okay, without Yang, the male principle, Yin, the female principle, does not exist. Okay, and without Yin in the foreground, without Yang in the foreground, Yin in the background also does not exist. You can't have a foreground without a background, right? And you can just imagine this very simply, like you have, if something's going to become visible, both Yin and Yang need to come into play. There's the background, which you cannot see, and there's something that extends forth from it in a phallic sort of way, light in extension. Okay, so then suddenly Yin appears because there's a background and there's something that stands forth from Yin in the foreground. Okay, so Yin's in the background, Yang's in the foreground. When Yang withdraws back into the underworld, or whatever it is, both concepts disappear and there's nothing. Okay, all you have is Tao, which is something you cannot see. All right, I'm bringing that up here because we also have the concepts of these god forms in the Neophyte Temple. Okay, there is the idea of Thoth being a deity of light and extension. He is the patron god of magic, along with Isis. Okay, and but he has a consort. Okay, and his consort is not as visible in Egyptian art, but she does occasionally make an appearance. Mat is the principle of order in the universe. Okay, that would be inaccurate to call her the principle of order, because then you think, well, she's all lawful and she's dutiful and she behaves really well and she, I don't know, she enforces the rules. Not really. She's more like the principle of the Tao in the background. The natural order of just things, how things spontaneously evolve, not according to laws. She is more the principle behind laws as they evolve into the foreground and become visible and then disappear and become other laws. Okay, I'm saying that because the soul boat of the Egyptian pharaoh the Egyptian king, is said to be steered by Maat and Thoth sometimes. And that's very interesting too, because in other words, if you see the Egyptian pharaoh, the Egyptian king on his boat, steering a course through the cosmos, okay, the two principles of steering that boat are, you could say, yin and yang, right? Well, it's really the background and the foreground, okay? So behind the pharaoh, you've got this background of universal order that's not really visible unless Thoth comes forth in this sort of beak-like way, and then he starts to discern where to go. This is Thoth's beak, right? So he extends forth from that, and he starts to discern, navigate where to go. And that's a really cool image for, like, steering your course through life. Okay, so you got this yin and yang principle at work within the boat of the soul, let's say, and it helps the person steer a course through life consciously. Okay, and when the person dies, that sort of that Thoth principle withdraws back into Maat, and everything disappears, right, for a while, and then things come forth again, and they start to happen again. Okay, these are principles. When you study the Egyptian god forms, these kind of become a reality for you, and you can do, like, finger puppets like I'm doing, right? Yeah, what does this all mean? You've heard a saying in New Age circles. The most important thing is that you just get out of your own way. Your life is none of your business, and you keep meddling in it in the wrong way. And so the experience of light and extension is that the divine takes over, or that Osiris within you comes forth and begins to run things, rather than the personal you who runs things, or the ego. So the ego just dies, but there's still a manifested principle that's guiding things along. Okay, so you are getting out of the way of that, which is your own Osiris current, or your own manifestation of light and extension. Okay, your own metaphorical magic wand. What does it feel like to have light and extension going on? Okay, so you do magic over a period of time, and what's happening is you're playing around with all these images, you're doing sigils and words of power, and you're playing around with these principles of 3 and 4, and magic circles, and wands, and cups, and daggers, and swords, right? And if you do it right, or you do it under proper guidance, okay, according to a curriculum like the Kabbalah Magic book, and hopefully with a teacher as well, then these rituals that you do on a regular basis are sort of stirring the waters around you and causing this light to come forth. Okay, so there really isn't any meditation necessary. And if you think about it, meditation is kind of like just sitting there and waiting for enlightenment to come to you. Why would you want to do that? Might not come. Okay. If you stir the waters properly, the waters of your soul or the waters of your imagination, if you stir them well, it's going to cause light and extension to happen. And the really cool thing about light and extension is that it is enlightenment experienced in the midst of action. And most of the time when you hear people talk about enlightenment, it's like, well, it's like you can only realize it when you're holding absolutely still and there's nothing going on, right? Okay. And so, yeah, a lot of people will look at it, meditation, like, well, you have to hold absolutely still, forget about the body, not be doing anything, shut off the mind. Okay. That's fine, but of course, that's very passive. It's very Osiris, trapped in the underworld. Okay. And so ultimately what's desirable is to be able to experience that in the field of action, in your life. And what that feels like is that power of the Osiris current overtakes you in spite of yourself. not because you call it forth necessarily, right? It just happens. Okay, yes, the rituals you do daily are calling it forth, but if you try to do that deliberately, it ain't going to happen really. It has to happen of its own accord. It just does its own thing, okay? And so while you're doing your daily activities, running around helping people do this or that, the Osiris current can well up inside you. And it can feel very much like, kind of like when you're watching a really good movie and you get tingling sensation, okay? Or you hear a Zeppelin song and then you get that really tingly Kundalini sensation. Yeah, and it can often feel like there's an energy rising up through the head, because kind of what's happened is that in the process of our formation of our ego persona, we have this ego persona in our head that's sort of taken everything over, and is keeping the whole body from lighting up from bottom to top. It's sort of suppressing the energy of the body, saying, "I'm in charge," right? If that kind of poofs away, energy rises up. It really does. It rises up through the body, and it sort of lights up the head. So usually when the ego is in charge, there's some stress going on that is dumbing you down, and the brain is not fully awake. But when you surrender and just let go of control, sort of like Luke in Star Wars when he's going to destroy the Death Star, right? Luke, let go, trust your feelings. That's a very real experience, and that can happen in the midst of daily life, even in stressful situations. And if they happen during somewhat stressful situations, if the enlightenment experience happens even in the midst of that, that's the experience of light and extension. And it's the experience of ultimate authenticity. It's like, oh, I'm really here working with you right now, and I'm working with you as I am. Okay, not as Lyam is, or not as the ego is, but really as this manifestation being here, as it naturally comes forth. It's authentic now, and that's a sort of, it can be a tingly sort of energy sensation, very often experienced in the head. And I bring this image here because apparently some people can even see it happening, and it can look like a halo or horns of light. Okay, so I have to remember that very interesting is that the horns of light were originally a sign of wisdom and power, or light and extension. Okay. And yeah, interesting thing is in the East, there's usually one chakra at the very top of the crown that lights up, let's say. But of course, really, that's the two hemispheres of the brain are now filled with static electricity, and there might be some horns of light activity going on there. Okay. Maybe you can see it. Maybe not. It's very interesting because if you try to see people's auras, it's not really necessarily a matter of seeing them. It's almost like a matter of looking at them and then closing your eyes right away. And what's the after image? Like, what does your impression of them look like? And there can be some very interesting things going on there. And it's like, oh, there are horns of light, or there is some kind of halo, or something like that. Or there's a demon munching on them from behind, or something like that, right? And of course, light and extension, we have to mention this. It is the caduceus is definitely an emblem of light and extension. And you can see that, it's very much similar to, in the East, they have the idea of the energy going up the spine. Okay, this is the persona has evolved into various phases up the spine from the base. And there are side energies, okay? So a magical path or a tantric path would basically leave that central channel there of the caduceus alone, because you really can't call upon that when you want it. It does its own thing. But you do have control over those side, whatever they are, the currents, okay? And those side currents really, all they really represent is the things that you can perceive around you, which you can tweak to call forth some sort of essence, some sort of real, authentic something or other, okay, from the a-causal universe, okay, or the a-cosmic essence, right? Okay, and so yes, light and extension can feel like this too. It can feel sort of like a caduceus. Okay, and this is something that will eventually overtake you. Another sensation you might get is that, oh, I'm going forward in life, and this thing is catching up to me from behind, and now sort of empowering me to do what I need to do. Okay, sort of like in Star Wars when Qui-Gon Jinn says, "I shall do as I must," Obi-Wan. It's a very mystical thing to say, but basically saying I'm doing what's in my nature to do. It doesn't matter anymore what the rules are. I'm following the Tao, not the rules set down by, some organization. Okay, and that's what it can feel like. It's naturally a very dangerous current, obviously, to the social order. Okay, and it is more powerful than any other external current. Okay, but of course, if you experience light and extension on a regular basis, you can get in some major trouble. Okay, unless you know how to stay invisible, and you might want to check out the video on invisibility. Interesting thing is, in this video, we have talked about the principles of invisibility and visibility again. Basically, who's the one who's invisible? Osiris. Who's the one who's visible? Horus. Okay, so learning the god forms and the formula around Osiris and Horus also confers the principles of visibility and invisibility. Not literally, of course, but very interestingly. Okay, so if you want to go about your authentic business and live the life that's the real you, you also have to learn how to stay sort of hidden sometimes. Okay, because living an authentic life can get you in a lot of trouble. Your very presence in the room can demolish a system of logic that has been in place for many eons, and it can dissolve in a second. And those who are the gatekeepers of society do not take kindly to holes being poked in their system. Yeah, so the principles of invisibility can be very important to the adept. All right. But unless you come up with videos that are so cryptic that nobody's going to care, nobody understands, right? Or only those who are ready to hear will understand, and then you're more or less safe. Let's hope. All right, well, until next time.